Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining today's podcast with TenantCloud. My name is Chris, and today I'm going to be bringing you the most recent news stories that have been relevant in the past 30 days. And we're going to start and jump right in. There's three pretty cool stories that we're going to share with you today. And the last one you definitely don't want to miss about the increased demand for property management and what is driving that. So stay tuned until the end of the episode and we will give you all of the details. Can't wait to spend this short time with you, and feel free to sound off anywhere you're hearing this. Feel free to sound off and ask any questions, put any comments, send us messages if you have any stories or things that you think are relevant to your day-to-day life in the property management industry or the real estate industry in general. And we'll be happy to answer any questions you have and look in any stories that you might be seeing that we haven't found online as well. Again, thanks for listening, and we'll jump right in. So for today's first story that I found interesting is this just happened. There was some information published in the past 24 hours about Airbnb. Airbnb, if you're not familiar with it, is the platform that started out with managing short-term rentals for landlords or just homeowners even, or apartment renters, sometimes illegally, and outside of the lease contracts, to rent short-term rentals, even if it's just for a day. And Airbnb has become a massive company worth many millions of dollars. In fact, I think their valuation last was somewhere in the neighborhood of $31 billion, which is crazy. And they're actually expected to be going on a purchasing spree. And one of the things that they purchased, there's a couple purchases they've made, including Hotel Tonight, which, if you're not familiar with Hotel Tonight, that is a last-minute hotel booking platform. The other thing that they purchased recently was Lyric. And if you're not familiar with Lyric, Lyric is the operator of a luxury apartment building rental platform. And basically what they do is they usually own a building or have a building, or they get a master lease on an entire floor of a luxury apartment building, and then they lease out just that one floor out of that building. Typically, it's usually no more than one floor. And they lease it out for short-term leases, whether you want to stay there for 2 days or 20 days or 200 days. They do long-term leases, but you are paying a premium for it. And they really gear themselves more towards the Airbnb-style short-term rental, but they focus on those luxury rentals, usually in like a downtown city area. They're all above board. They're not like Airbnb in that they didn't start by just kind of illegally allowing people to use a platform to rent out spaces that they didn't own or didn't have the right to lease out. They're doing everything above board. From my understanding, they actually own most of the buildings, if not all of the buildings, or at least have master leases on the spaces that they're leasing, and they abide by all city laws and regulations no matter where they are. They're currently, I think, in 13 cities right now. So Airbnb purchased them. I believe they led a $160 million investment in them, along with other companies. And they to clarify, they didn't purchase them. They led a $160 million investment in it, and they're one of the primary investors. And it's split evenly between debt and equity. And other firms like Obvious Ventures, Fifth Wall Ventures, and Tusk Ventures, I think some angels invested in it, along with RXR Realty and some others. And it's believed to be that Airbnb, because they're actually thought to be approaching their formal public offering in the near future, they're going to be preparing for an IPO, probably either this year or next year. And so I think what they're doing is they're moving more towards a above board approach, so that they can present themselves to potential investors as being more of a long-term thing, not just kind of a under the table type service or platform. They're looking to present themselves as a legitimate contender in the long term for short-term vacation rentals and remaining competitive in that space for years to come. And I think that their acquisition of companies like this and their investment in companies like this and Hotel Tonight are just those first initial steps. And I think you're going to see a couple more things like this, or at least more integration with these platforms, with Airbnb, to make Airbnb more of a formal short-term rental platform. It's presenting themselves in that way. So also, Lucky Homes is another one. And so you got three. You got Lyric, Lucky Homes, and Hotel Tonight. And it's been guessed that their recent internal valuation for Airbnb has now approached somewhere in the neighborhood of $38 billion. So they're really trying to battle the negative press that they've gotten. For instance, the state of New York recently sued a bunch of landlords or property owners and those who rented out their properties illegally on the Airbnb platform for short-term stays. They've sued for upwards of $20 million in damages. And they've really been on the negative side of the short-term stay, hotel stay, vacation stay industry in general. And so this is just their foray into kind of joining. If you can't beat your enemy, you join them. So that's an interesting story. I think there's a lot more that's going to develop with this over the next 6 to 8 months. I think you're going to see a little bit more activity from Airbnb moving in that direction. And so definitely something to keep an eye out on. And also for those of you who are involved in short-term rentals or short-term rental management, it's important to keep an eye on these developments because you can kind of get a sense of where things are moving and any changes that you can take advantage of for your own business as these things do change, and they do change rapidly. And I think that 2019 is definitely going to be a year of big changes when it comes to the short-term rental industry. Up next, we will be going over a very interesting story about property managers who wrongfully evicted the wrong people, 127 of them to be more specific. And stay tuned. We'll cover that shortly. The story we bring you next is in the state of Virginia. A property management company must pay nearly $1.5 million to 127 service members who were wrongfully evicted, according to the Justice Department. This was just announced in March, in the past 30 days, and the company is PRG Real Estate Management. They had evicted tenants from 2006 to 2017 without disclosing to state courts that they were active duty service members, which is a violation of the Service Members Civil Relief Act. It is extremely important that in your property management of your properties that you know whether or not your tenant is a service member or not. And there is a website you can go onto, and we'll post a link with this podcast on TenantCloud.com for the site that you can go to, the official government site that you can actually look up and see if your tenant is an active service member. It's very simple. It takes less than 30 seconds to put the information in and get confirmation of whether they are or are not. And you bring that printout with your paperwork for the eviction to the court, and you always keep a copy of it in your file, in the eviction file, in the event that something like this ever comes up. You do not want to be on the wrong side of this argument when it comes to illegally evicting active duty service members. The reason is because active duty service members typically are called at the last minute. They're often unavailable. You cannot reach them. You cannot deliver notices to them. They may not even know that you are evicting them. They could be overseas. They could be in the middle of a firefight. So it's very important, and also it's just respectful to make sure that you're not evicting an active duty service member if they're active duty, and that you file the correct paperwork and go about it the proper way. It's just the right thing to do when it comes to our service members who are serving our country. They're serving us. And so, again, interesting development. and there's going to be penalties that are coming from the government, so they'll have to pay to the government, and they're going to have to pay to the service members. It's a big deal. So check out the Service Members Civil Relief Act and make sure that you are following that to a T when it comes to your eviction process, or even just breaking the lease, because active duty service members in many states, and I believe even on a federal level, are able to break leases under certain circumstances. So you definitely want to make sure that you read up on that and make sure that you have your leases typed up correctly and that you are following the guidelines of that law. Next up, last story, interesting story. 2019 is going to be a big year, and we'll share with you why there's going to be an increase for demand for property management. Now we're going to dive into why 2019 is going to be such a huge year for property managers in the United States. And one of the biggest things is it is believed that there is going to be a 15% increase this year over 2018 for apartment deliveries. That is a big deal. In the U.S., in the top 66 metros in the United States, will deliver a total of 300,000 new apartment units this year. That is according to research from CBRE estimates. That is a 15% increase over 2018 deliveries, and with an expectation of over $150 billion in multifamily investments. And there will be additional investments being fueled by Opportunity Zone funds. And that's going to mean two big things. That's going to mean more competition at existing assets under management and new demand from developers for property management representation. So two huge opportunities here for property management companies, and it's going to increase competition, which is good news for multifamily owners and for property managers who are able to adjust their marketing strategies quickly and effectively. So definitely something to be preparing to take advantage of, especially if you're looking to scale up your company and scale your operations, as well as to understand where those units are coming and what type of units they are and how that's going to affect your local market, because it will affect your local market. Could be in a positive or even in a negative way, depending on your current supply and demand. And so but it is a huge opportunity for property managers, especially experienced property managers, because a lot of these developers are going to be looking for an experienced property manager who's in place to operate that property and get it off the ground efficiently and smoothly and start generating the returns on that investment as quickly as possible. And so not only that, property managers are expected to start playing a bigger role in consulting and being advisors and counselors to multifamily owners and developers, and finding ways to help them save money and strategize earlier on than what it currently has been up until now. I think that the property management industry is becoming more closely linked with the development and with multifamily owners in those early stages of planning to build, where to build, planning in the development of the build, and then the launch of the build and the marketing of the build, and so on and so forth. All of the stages of a development, property managers are gradually, every year, we've started to see a change in the way that property managers are interacting with the various moving pieces of new developments. And I think that that's something to stay on top of and to stay tuned to and look for areas of opportunity, either for expansion, growth, and also just for new opportunities, completely new opportunities separate from just the day-to-day property management routine of collecting rent and managing the maintenance side of stuff and so on and so forth. So I thank you for listening today, and we definitely appreciate you taking the time to listen to this news recap with TenantCloud and things that are relevant in the property management and real estate industry. And we'll look forward to sharing more information with you next time. And if you have any news pieces that you think would be interesting to jump into, or are not quite sure how they might impact you or the real estate market in general, feel free to share it with us. Have any questions, send them our way. We'll be happy to answer any questions you have, and we'll look forward to talking to you next time.